Are you looking for an athletic scholarship? You're in the right place. This is the Recruit Me Athletic Scholarship Podcast, the longest-running podcast on recruiting and athletic scholarships. We're here to help your family navigate the recruiting road all the way to an athletic scholarship. He's a recruiting expert and a dad of a D1 athlete and a high school athlete pursuing a scholarship. With a wealth of experience to share, here's Recruit Me CEO, Brent Hanks.
Welcome to the 250th episode of the Athletic Scholarship Podcast. As the introduction says, the longest-running podcast on recruiting and athletic scholarships. This episode is going to be featuring clips and subjects from episodes 1 through 203. Jon Fulger, the founder of the Athletic Scholarship Podcast and Recruit Me, started the Athletic Scholarship Podcast with its first episode on October 14, 2015. And he produced 11 episodes from that time to September 29th of 2016. Then, with episode number 12 on October 4th, 2016, Jon took off with a weekly podcast and went strong up until episode 203 when he introduced me as the new owner and CEO of Recruit Me. Jon, like me, navigated the recruiting trail with his twin sons. Both of Jon's sons ended up pitching and attending the Air Force Academy. As Jon had families ask him how to manage through the recruiting process, him and a friend, Ron Johnston, put together all of Jon's notes and evolved those notes into a 200-page manual and a website. That was back in 2002. Jon developed and wrote the free recruiting power pack that you can still get at recruit-me.com. And then he wrote 2 books, the Athletic Scholarship Playbook and the Athletic Scholarship 24-month Recruiting Planner and Journal. You can get more information on those books at recruit-me.com website under the Resources tab. Jon helps student athletes and families in recruiting for over 20 years and has sold books and the Recruit Me 3.0 athletic scholarship system and has given great recruiting advice to thousands of recruits over the last 20-plus years. As I re-listen and review past episodes of Jon's Athletic Scholarship Podcast, I can feel the care and thoughtfulness that Jon put into helping student athletes and families by answering questions that will come in the recruiting process. Jon, 20 years ago, and me in 2017 had the same thought process. How can we help families that are going to ask the same questions we asked? Both of us knew that families needed to get questions answered, questions like when to start, how to start, and what to do during the recruiting process. In this celebration of the Athletic Scholarship Podcast 250th episode, I did a little research on how Jon did his podcast, and I found some of the other milestone episodes and the most popular episodes. In the episode title, the word how appeared 42 times, like How to Use the NCAA Website, episode 196. Here's How to Get to the Next Level, episode 188. How to Build Your Recruiting Framework, episode 174. How to Keep a Coach's Interest Long-Term, episode 148. How do I know when coaches are really interested in me, episode 104. How to Multiply Your Recruiting Efforts, episode 79. How to Make a Great Impression on College Coaches, episode 50. And How to Get the Right Recruiting Advice, episode 21. Those are some of the how-to theme podcast. Also, Jon was great at having a list of things to do in recruiting. 60 episodes have titles like 10 Winning Moves to an Athletic Scholarship, episode 20. 5 Steps to an Athletic Scholarship, episode 63. 5 Best Recruiting Habits, episode 127. 5 Questions Every Sports Family Must Answer, episode 179. And he had a series of podcasts to cover many, many different subjects to help families and student athletes. There are at least 8 series that cover steps to an athletic scholarship. The Athletic Scholarship Podcast had a series called Recruiting Basics, episodes 197 through 204. Your Recruiting Framework, episodes 174 to 178. The Truth About Recruiting That Will Transform Your Results, episodes 164 through 166. The Recruiting Funnel, episodes 114 through 120. Secrets to Your Summer Recruiting Success, episodes 95 through 98. Supercharging Your Recruiting Game, episodes 90 to 93. The Number One Secret to Getting an Athletic Scholarship, episode 44 through 46. These how-tos and series are great to review and learn from. I encourage you to go back and listen to as many as possible. Let's start off by hearing the very first athletic scholarship podcast by Jon Fulger back in October 14th of 2015. Jon did 11 podcasts the first year, and they were from 14 minutes long to 48 minutes long. Episode number 1 was 48 minutes. Here is the introductory of episode number 1.
Hi, I'm Jon Fulger. So good to have you along for the premiere episode of the Athletic Scholarship Podcast. This is the podcast for parents and athletes that explores every aspect of recruiting an athletic scholarship. It's coaching that you can apply to your athletic scholarship pursuit. Now, it's primarily for parents, but I want athletes to listen too. So welcome aboard. You're here at the beginning.
Jon starts all of this off by having a list, 5 things.
So what I want to do here is pass along 5 things that will help you avoid pain, disappointment, and financial disaster. That's what we're going to go through in this premiere episode, what I learned in the athletic scholarship process.
In this first episode, Jon tells about how the recruiting started for his 2 sons and their family.
I was sitting in a high school gymnasium with them one night with a bunch of other parents and kids, and we were listening to this speaker who was able to teach us the steps as much as he could in an hour to get an athletic scholarship. He had published a book, which I was first in line to buy at the end of that evening. And he really opened my eyes to some things. The door was wide open. I had no clue what this athletic scholarship world was about. And that was the start. That was a start for us and our boys.
So listening to a speaker lit a fire in Jon and his wife to learn more about the recruiting process. Both Jon and I are hoping something we say and the time that you take will inspire you and your student athlete to learn and take initiative to start and complete your journey to a spot on a college team. Jon tells his new audience about the dedication, the goals of the podcast, and of Recruit Me. Let's hear it straight from Jon.
This podcast is really dedicated to taking those principles and drilling in deeply so you can not just have a cursory read of material. You don't just go on the internet and pull things down and you hear someone say this and someone say that, but we're really going to dig deep in some of the things that you need to know and do as you pursue an athletic scholarship. It's for parents, it's for athletes.
In episode 1 of the Athletic Scholarship Podcast, Jon lays out why he developed the Recruit Me system and why he was so passionate over the last 20 years and the last 203 episodes. Hear what Jon says is the biggest reason that student athletes don't go and get a scholarship and play the sport that they love.
I really believe that there are, and I know that there are so many athletes, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, who deserve an athletic scholarship because of their athletic ability and because of their academic ability, but they don't get it. They don't get the scholarship, and that's tragic. They're getting passed by, and not because they don't have the qualifications, the talent, the grades, but just because coaches don't even know they exist. That phrase rings in my mind. Coaches don't know they even exist. I heard one parent tell us that, and that is so true. And they were able to solve that, and you can solve that too.
So let's hear how Jon signed off from the very first Athletic Scholarship Podcast.
Well, we've come to the end of the premiere episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. I really, really want you to get practical benefit out of the Athletic Scholarship Podcast. It's the podcast for parents and athletes that explores every aspect of recruiting and athletic scholarships. Not in every episode. We're going to take it one bite at a time.
So those were the clips from episode 1. You got the foundation for the next 200 plus episodes. Episode 12 was the first of the actual weekly podcast and started the procession of 15-minute weekly podcast. Let's hear how Jon introduced the first weekly podcast and what the subject was.
What the NCAA says. This is the Athletic Scholarship Podcast, episode number 12. Hi, this is Jon Fulger, and welcome to the Athletic Scholarship Podcast. 15 minutes that will change your scholarship future. And it's a weekly podcast now. Been retooling this, and so you can count on an episode being released every Tuesday. That's my pledge to you. No matter what happens in my life, I pledge I'll have one out to you every Tuesday.
Jon continues in episode 12 on the NCAA and what the NCAA says about recruiting.
So in this episode, we're going to be talking about what the NCAA says about recruiting. Recruiting rules are just so weird and so complex. And thankfully, you don't need to know them all.
Jon covers the NCAA definition of recruiting and what a dead and a contact period are and the difference between an official and unofficial visit. Also, verbal commitments and the NLI, National Letter of Intent. Jon kicks off the weekly editions with a bang and with the first of the weekly podcasts. Jon's most listened to athletic scholarship podcast is episode 168, How to Fight Anxiety and Panic in Recruiting. This episode should be the most listened to because that's exactly why Jon and I got into the recruiting education business. Jon opens up episode 168 with a well-done and complete description of why this episode on anxiety and panic is so popular.
How to fight anxiety and panic in recruiting. This is the Athletic Scholarship Podcast, episode number 168. Welcome to the Athletic Scholarship Podcast. I'm Jon Fulger, Athletic Scholarship Coach and a dad of 2 scholarship athletes. I'm also the CEO of Recruit Me, podcaster, author, and speaker. This is 15 minutes that will change your scholarship future, so I dig in and give you takeaways you can use immediately. Hey, you can find this podcast on your favorite podcast app. Go for it, subscribe, and you get it every time it pops up, and that's on Tuesdays. Here we are getting it popping up a little bit late on Tuesday, but hey, I got it up before midnight, didn't I? You got fresh content here, I'm telling you. In this episode, we're going to approach a topic that kind of most athletes and most parents can relate to because, and I went through this too, my wife and I. You hear the clock ticking, and so you get a little anxious. You start to panic. You wonder if this athletic scholarship is going to materialize. Is my son or daughter going to get recruited? If you're the athlete, you're looking around. Are any coaches watching, any college coaches out there? I mean, you look up in the stands and you go, I wonder if I'm being scouted. And you get anxious, you panic, and it even takes away from how well you can do in your competition.
In the middle of episode 168, Jon gives great advice on what he calls one-offs. Let's listen.
Don't let the one-offs sway you. What do I mean by that? The one-offs. Those are, these stories that pop up, or the Instagram post or Facebook post that you see, or the sports article online that you see just totally playing up a signing, a commitment, may even be a verbal commitment, which isn't even binding. Stay away from verbal commitments. Don't even think about it. So much can happen between your verbal commitment and when the national letter of intent it needs to be signed, when you're able to do that. The one-offs are those stories that, the newspapers, they need some exciting stories to tell. And so they're not going to tell you about the athletes who are really trudging through the recruiting process like you are. They're going to tell you about the ones who have had victory, the ones who have signed, and here they are. There's a picture of them signing, or there's a picture of them making the statement that I've committed. All this because they want it to be dramatic. They want people to read the article, go to their website, buy their paper, whatever it is. These kinds of things can really do a number on you. It's a head game. Don't let the one-offs sway you.
Episode 168 is the most listened to by giving advice for everyone and helping to take away the questioning that gives a large amount of recruits and their families anxiety and panic. Jon predicted how profound episode 168 was going to be.
You're going to start winning the fight against anxiety and panic in recruiting. Another suggestion is when you're feeling that way, go back to episode number 168. This one, listen to it. We all need positive input. We need reminders. You're not going to remember really much of what I just said to you in the last 10 minutes. Go back and relearn it and remind yourself of that episode number 168.
Well, I'm going to wrap up this celebratory episode of 250 episodes of the Athletic Scholarship Podcast. Thank you to everyone that is listening, that has listened, that has contributed information to the shows, and especially to Jon Fulger for his foresight and dedication. I asked Jon for a comment about this milestone, hoping he would shine the light on the past and himself. But that backfired, and Jon recorded a clip that shines the light forward. Join me next week for an interview with a junior college basketball coach, and thanks again to Jon and everyone that's listened. Happy 250.
Hi, Brent. Congratulations on 250 episodes of the Recruit Me Athletic Scholarship Podcast. What a milestone. When I turned this business over to you a year ago, I handed you the baton and you ran with it. And you become quite the podcaster. I mean, you're sprinting around the track. And I listen to your episodes, so much great advice. Also from experience, because you're going through it right now as a family, and you're helping so many other families. So congratulations, not only on this milestone, but with the work you're doing with Recruit Me. Families across the country and around the world are in good hands with you.